Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk. I am so excited to be here with Matthew Dillon, who is the co-CEO of the Organic Trade Association, which is an organization that aims to promote and protect the organic industry. Matthew, always a delight to see you. It was really good to see you at Expo West, I guess a month and a half ago now. It seems both a long time ago and very recently, given
The world
everything that's
seems to be
happened.
moving very fast and with a lot of density of information. So yeah, great to be here and to see you again as well.
Thank you. So I just want to get in for our listeners and our viewers. Can you describe what the Organic Trade Association is and what it does?
Yeah, you bet. So we're a membership trade association representing everything from seed to shelf in the organic sector in North America. Input providers, farmers, aggregators, ingredient manufacturers, brands, retailers, the whole kit and caboodle. And we do consumer and industry research. We work on regulatory renovation to make sure that you can trust the organic label. We advocate for organic in the Farm Bill and another policy in DC. And we provide companies with trade opportunities internationally as well.
And this is an organization that started in the mid 80s, and that was before there was organic certification by the USDA in the United States, right?
Yeah, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary today, and it was started by some early, pioneers in organic who recognized that the state model of regulating organic was maybe not working as well, and that having a harmonized national standard would help grow the industry and get more acres on the ground and more farmers involved. So we're always grateful to, recognize we stand on the shoulders of some of the great giants in the industry from the 80s and even earlier. And we're also super excited about the future. I mean, there's challenges in the moment, headwinds,
Hmm. Hmm.
but with our consumer data and our industry data, the future still looks very bright for us.
That's really good to hear. I kind of want to take a step back. Let's break it down for everyone. Why would a farmer choose or want to grow, organic products? And two, why are consumers interested in them? I know it's a very simple question,
Yeah,
but I think it gives us some level setting.
it's a great question and it's a hard question because the answer somewhat depends on the producer or the business or the consumer. And here's the important thing, I think, Dani, is to remember that farmers and businesses choose to take on these additional regulations that are involved in organic and the challenges of farming without as many spray on solutions for pesticides or antibiotics for their cattle uh, for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's economic, sometimes it's because of challenges they've seen in their community with high rates of Parkinson's disease or cancer.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's that they've lost their curiosity and sitting in a tractor and pushing buttons and they want to be more out there on the ground and in the
Right.
soil. And but I think what's important is to remember that farmers and businesses as well as consumers opt in some of the time, but not all. So while the early adopters of organic tended to be all or nothing, they were 100% organic farms or
Hmm.
businesses. We're seeing a trend of more and more split operations.
Mm.
Where I'm standing in Nebraska, 61% of organic operations are split. They do some organic and some conventional.
Wow.
More than 50% in Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota, Pennsylvania, even in California, over a third of operations are split. And so businesses, consumers, and farmers sometimes opt in, but it's not as much all or nothing as it used to be. And I think
Yeah.
that's exciting.
I think that's really exciting that it's not either or, it's not as binary as it once was. It makes it more, I think, flexible for farmers, especially with, all of the things that are sort of hitting them right now, whether it's the climate crisis or the economic crisis,
Yeah,
they have that flexibility. And that's what we want
yeah,
farmers to have, that flexibility and
absolutely.
de-risk their operations.
Absolutely. And diversification is one of the ways that you just de-risk yourself in different market conditions. I think businesses think the same way. I mean, there's very large businesses, Purdue, Tyson, Cargill, Nestle, Mondelez that are involved with organic, and they're doing it for different reasons. But we welcome them all into the sector, especially if we can convert more acres
Right.
and get more farmers involved in the opportunity and reduce exposure for farmers and farm workers to pesticides and other risks in the environment.
I like that you keep using the word opportunity because there is so much opportunity in organic. And especially now you have, consumers who are my age, you have consumers who are, Gen Z who are
Mhm.
really interested in the story of their food. And then that gives them an opportunity to really understand, you said from seed to shelf, what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah, I think generationally, that's where we start to get kind of excited is that, uh, put it bluntly, like boomers aren't really that big of fans of organic. I'm going
Right.
to assume, Dana, you and I are pretty similar. We're Gen Xers, I'm pretty
Yep.
sure. Uh, And Gen Xers, our data, our consumer research shows Gen Xers really do care about organic and see they trust it and they're also willing to pay. But that trust and willingness to pay really takes off in millennials and hits peak interest in Gen Z. 90% of Gen Z consumers are already committed organic consumers or aspirational. And what we're seeing is that with both millennial and Gen Z, that's the case regardless of income. So, of course,
Right.
those Gen Z and millennials that are over 100K, they index a little bit higher in their purchases. But even those who are in like lower categories, like under 75K, are still very devoted organic shoppers and they want the opportunity to buy even more. And that's exciting. And they're linking it primarily to, free from and clean label claims, but there's also a trend with younger generation of linking it to soil health, farm worker
Right.
well-being, climate, thinking in these kind of aspirational ways about leaving a better planet behind.
Can you talk more about that soil health aspect and how that speaks to, not just young consumers, but really all of us?
Yeah, well, I think there's two things with that. Like the case is still that people thinking about what's good for me or good for my family is still what is driving purchases.
Mhm.
It's those younger generation that you're seeing more of that. I think there's been more awareness about the importance of biodiversity, of soil health, of clean water. We've heard so many challenging stories about communities struggling with clean water. And and I think that folks are realizing that what you do to the planet, you do to yourself. And so
Mhm.
you can care about the health conscious and realize, oh, I better care about the soil health as well. And I think that linkage is starting to occur. One of the challenges we see is that consumers don't always recognize the attributes of organic. They trust the seal overall, but they might not know it means no GMOs. They might not know it means fewer pesticides,
Mhm.
significantly fewer pesticides. They might not know it means no growth hormones or no antibiotics. And so there's a lot of work to do in the sector of helping connect those attributes to the label.
Yeah.
I'll call out one more thing on soil health. And our consumer research shows that while we all in the sector talk a lot about regenerative, like we as the industry
Right.
collectively talk about regenerative, consumers don't understand it.
Right.
Less than 10% of consumers understand and are willing to pay for it.
Hmm.
Put in a fake standard and a fake label in our last survey, and consumers said they recognized that more than they recognized regenerative labels. And
Wow.
so there's still some that doesn't mean that it's not where we should be going, but there needs to be that recognition that there's a lot of work to do, and the consumers can feel overwhelmed with terminology.
Absolutely. I think, especially right now when we're living in very uncertain economic times, then you throw this other label, regenerative organic certified, or that certification process, it can be really confusing. And so there are a couple of things I want to talk about
Yeah,
here.
you bet.
One, go ahead.
No, you bet. Sorry, I was going on for a while there. I want to make sure you
No, no,
question.
no. Again, we're in this sort of unpredictable time. Do you see sort of consumers still willing to pay for organic, or do you foresee, 6 months from now, there's a decline in how much, consumers are willing to pay?
So we just today are putting out our new market research from 2024, and the good news is that organic grew at 5.2%,
That's great.
more than double conventional sales, and even indexed for inflation. Uh,
Wow.
Growth is there, so units are up as well as revenue as a whole, and there's some areas that really shine. So
Hmm.
2024, great momentum. In part, that was overcoming some of the inflationary headwinds that organic faced in 2022 and 23, where we were up in revenue but down in units, and it was really inflationary prices that were driving growth. So good news in 2024. What does 2025 and beyond look like? We're forecasting that over the course of to the end of the decade, we're going to grow at 5.1%. The headwinds, though, do include inflation. So tariffs, there's always winners and losers,
Hmm.
but certainly tariffs can lead to increased costs and supply chain challenges. And when you have a premium price product like organic, that can get to a point where it slows growth. So we see that as a
Sure.
potential headwind. And certainly all of our members, from farmers to businesses, are concerned about inflation and its impact on growth. Other concerns we have about headwinds for growth could be, do we have a national organic program in the USDA that's funded at the right level to meet the growth and meet the demand that consumers have for more acres on the ground, more products on the shelf. And right now in DC, like the cuts from Doge on USDA, we don't know the final outcomes of how they'll
Yep.
impact the National Organic Program, but that could have an effect on our ability to delight consumers with more organic products.
Right. The other thing I was thinking about when you were talking is, you mentioned, consumers' connection to their own personal health and then the health of the environment. Transparency and traceability
Yep.
help consumers understand those things and, help them gain awareness and education. How are you thinking about it at OTA to improve transparency and traceability, in the organic sector?
Yeah. So great question, multiple things. I think organic integrity is a constantly moving target of how we ensure that consumers trust. 74% of consumers trust organic more than any other label. American Heart is right there, health check mark right there with organic, non-GMO, not far behind. Uh, we have to keep working on strengthening that integrity.
Hmm.
In the last farm bill, we got something called strengthening organic enforcement. It's been burdensome for farmers and for manufacturers in its rollout. It's been really challenging and costly, but it's going to help ensure that there's going to be less fraud. When you hit $71 billion, 71.5 billion as an industry, there are going to be folks who try to skirt around the edges of what's allowed, and we need to make sure that that's as mitigated as possible. We just worked with a couple of senators, Senator Tina Smith, Democrat from Minnesota, and Senator Ricketts, my senator here from Nebraska, Republican, on legislation called Organic Import Verification Act that would require testing for organic feedstuffs coming from overseas. Organic still imports a lot of corn, a lot of soy, a lot of beef, things that we can actually do here.
Hmm.
And to onshore that production, we need to do two things. One, make sure that what's coming in has integrity and that farmers here aren't competing against fraudulent imports, not a
Right.
level playing field. And then we also need to invest in our own infrastructure and technical assistance to help more farmers convert.
Yeah, that's bringing up technical assistance. I think, um, it it's unclear to me whether Secretary Rollins, the new Secretary of Agriculture, is interested in organic, and I know you probably have insights, but the technical assistance that's needed to help farmers, maintain good organic production is really vital to all of this. And a lot of that has come
Yeah.
from, I know OTA and other organizations are very invested in that. But are you concerned? I mean, I can only imagine what you and your colleagues are thinking with this new administration and sort of all of these cuts and not really knowing where things are shaking out. We're not yet at 100 days.
Yeah, I think uncertainty is not good for the business community. I don't think it's good for the citizen community in general.
Right.
Some uncertainty is always natural in any changing of administrations, but right now the uncertainty is problematic. We've had grants that have been frozen for more than 90 days, including ones that provide technical assistance to farmers. The trade association we work with, Rodale, is one of our
Yeah.
subcontractors and others to provide that type of technical assistance. Certification agencies do the same. Um, we don't know the future of those funds. So that does create some challenges for us moving forward. We don't know if where Secretary Rollins sits with organic.
Mhm.
I'd like to think that from an America First perspective, listen, this organic is good for rural economies. We're
Right.
redoing our hotspot research with Penn State this year, but historically, organic producers and the communities they operate tend to be economically more successful than their
Right.
conventional counterparts. And so we think this is good for US. We need to be onshoring more of that opportunity. And our story with this administration is that, hey, we're the voluntary regulation, right? You
Hmm.
don't have to, if you're interested in trying to avoid dyes or synthetic emulsifiers in food manufacturing or reduce exposure to chemicals, agricultural chemicals in food or growth hormones, some of what the MAHA movement cares about. We're that voluntary opt-in
Yeah.
regulation that farmers and businesses and consumers can lean to. So we think we have a great story for the admin, and we look forward to talking to Secretary Rollins sometime soon.
Yeah, thanks for that. You recently wrote an op-ed that, highlights how organic offers a way to deliver on the promises of MAHA. Can you talk a little bit about what you outlined?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that very few businesses like regulations, and farmers are businesses. People don't like to be told what to do, even sometimes if they recognize that it's for public good. Just kind of our American spirit in a way. We want that
Sure.
freedom to operate, freedom to farm. Uh, I believe regulations sometimes are necessary to making sure we have clean water in our communities and that our farmers and farm workers aren't being exposed and their families to dangerous pesticides that create problems. However, uh, there's some indication that some of what the MAHA movement wants is too much for some of the Republican congressional representatives in particular. 79 of them just sent a letter to the administration and its cabinet saying that some of this may go too far, too
Mm,
extreme.
mm,
And so we believe that it's important to remind them that we have a pathway to solve for some of these things that MAHA wants in food, and that really we should be figuring out how to create more access and more affordability around it, remove some of the barriers and the hurdles and costs that are keeping our organic produce out of the hands of families who want it but can't always
right,
afford it.
right.
And so John Forker and I, from Once Upon a Farm CEO, who wrote the op-ed, we just think it's like it is that option to opt in and not create additional regulatory burden on farmers and businesses who are always going to fight against that.
Can you talk more about sort of the burdens placed on organic farmers particularly,
Yeah,
and why, there are reasons that not every farmer in the United States
yeah,
is organic, and it's often that regulation. They're scared of it before they get
yeah.
into it for multiple reasons.
Yeah, there's two levels of kind of regulatory burden, I guess. And one I would say is farmers sometimes see as a burden, and the other farmers see as a learning opportunity. So
Sure.
the one level is like every year they have to do an organic system plan, and they have to be audited and inspected, and they go through a very paperwork and time and financially costly process as farmers and as manufacturers and everyone in the supply chain to get their organic certification. And that listen, almost every organic operator I know complains about the complexity and cost of that.
Sure.
And there are ways we could simplify it, I think, and keep integrity. More to come on that. We have some legislative ideas there. But the other part is like less of a burden. It's more that the farmers have few tools in their toolbox, fewer spray-on solutions for pests, for weeds, on animal health issues. So they have to think in holistic, preventative ways about how they're going to create a farm plan with the right diversification that helps break some of the disease
Yeah.
cycles, the weed cycles. Most farmers I know love that challenge. It's a challenge some years,
Yeah.
but they're driven in part by that curiosity to figure out how to optimize their ecosystems to work for them instead of against them. And that costs them. It costs them time. It's more labor costs. Uh, and farmers need to be rewarded for that
Yeah.
burden.
Yeah.
And we think like rewarding them for ecosystem services needs to not just be a consumer cost, but it needs to be carried by public support as well, like USDA has historically done.
Again, I love that you frame it as an opportunity for farmers. It is this immense opportunity as a learning experience to learn, more about your farm and your animals and the environment. You, how are you thinking about helping farmers who are like, okay, I'm ready, but I need some time to transition, and I'm scared about that part, and how much money I'll lose or won't, or how,
Yeah,
what's going to happen. Again, the
yeah,
uncertainty. How do you
it's a
help those?
three it's a 3 year transition. That's the other
Yeah,
thing is for 3 years farmers are farming in an organic way, but they don't have certification. They're selling into conventional markets, so getting lower prices, but doing all that extra work. And getting through that transition takes multiple things. One, it takes clear signals that the markets are there, that consumer demand is strong, that there is processing infrastructure near them so that they're not having to ship their organic dairy, their milk or their crops thousands of miles to get it into
right.
processing. So we as an industry are very much focused on one, the market development, two, how do we make sure the infrastructure is there to help farmers get it into the marketplace, including international exports.
Mhm. Mhm.
45% of our exports go to Mexico and Canada. So we got to keep those relationships strong too,
Right.
organic exports. Uh, So we as a private sector need to invest in that, and we're continue to advocate for the USDA to also invest in that infrastructure. Technical assistance that you've already talked about, like making sure farmers are learning the skills
Yeah.
to manage their weeds and pests and their soil fertility in accordance with organic standards, again, remains the responsibility of both the public and private sector. Land grant universities have really stepped up in recent years compared to the early years of organic, but they're also challenged by budgetary constraints right now. So it's combination of strong markets, the right infrastructure and logistics to get product into the marketplace, and then the technical support to get farmers there. Financing is the fourth. And
Yeah.
financing is like challenging in that 3 year cycle, but there are some creative ways that businesses have done it, including giving long-term contracts for farmers who are in transition.
Those long-term contracts are everything for farmers, right? In so many ways, because they
Yeah,
give that stability.
they did. When Tom and I, my co-CEO, Tom Chapman, when we were at Cliff Bar, we did a 10-year transition for fig farmers in California to help them convert their conventional orchards into organic and make sure that they knew that there was a market for them year 4 through 10 that was really paying them that premium and helping them get there. I think that has to continue, those kind of
Absolutely.
programs.
You bring up Cliff, and I think you've done so many different things throughout your career, including farming yourself. Can you talk about how those experiences are influencing your role at OTA right now?
Yeah, honestly, Danny, I thought I was retired a couple of years ago or
I
semi-retired.
remember.
Uh, um, I was doing some consulting and mentoring young leaders in organic, and I was loving that. Listen, I've been in agriculture my whole life. I grew up in a conventional ag family. I grew my first organic crop with some monks at a Benedictine monastery where I went to high school in 1983. I've watched the quality of organic produce and products continue to evolve and become the highest standard of quality in the marketplace, of flavor, nutrition. I've watched us grow from a small sector to now this $71.5 billion sector, and I've seen the growing pains. And I think my reason for coming to work for OTA and getting involved again is I think organic needs to be more relevant in the discussion about the future of our planet. I want us to think about organic not just as an investment in any given season or any given quarterly returns for a business, but really an investment in future generations and people we will
Yeah.
never meet. Like, I believe that we can leave our farms, our soil, our genetic diversity and biodiversity, our knowledge better by investing in organic and continuing to challenge ourselves to not think of it as a gold standard that's done, but that as a standard that has to evolve and
Yeah.
improve with consumer demand and with the best sound science we can find. And I'm super thrilled to just have that kind of like, I have this continuous improvement mentality about organic. And I know that when you get to a certain size, every change and every improvement gets harder and harder.
Or
But all the more reason for us to invest because as we get bigger, the more positive impact we have on future generations.
Absolutely. And just on a personal note, OTA is so lucky to have you and that sort of expertise. You mentioned nutrition, and
Mhm.
it's common sense to, I think, most of the people listening and watching that organic foods would be more nutritious, but we're just kind of learning the science about that. Can you talk about, the
Yeah.
nutrition side of this?
I'm going to say something kind of controversial and some of my members won't like. I think we got to be careful in talking and making claims and making grand statements
Mm,
about nutrient density. We've seen it from some studies and some things with fruits and vegetables and in milk. Um, but making a blanketed claim that organic is more nutrient, or even just some of what's going on with nutrient density in soil, I think the research we need to keep investing in it. I think it's important research, but nutritional density is complicated. It's a combination. When I was a plant breeder, we talked about it as a gem triangle. It's genetics, environment, and management. It's the crop genetics, the microbial genetics in the soil. It's the environment, including temperature and climate impacts. It's the management. It's even post-harvest handling. All of those have an impact on nutrient density. And it's very hard to have controls over all three of those and get to the place where you can make these better than claims with veracity. And so
right.
I encourage us as a sector and all sectors to invest in that research and keep trying to move the needle. But I think we have to be careful. There are labels out there that I think greenwash certain issues, and their consumers are confused about what they mean. I'll call it out. You've heard me say it before. Most
Sure.
consumers think non-GMO project verified means no agricultural chemicals when they're still spraying atrazine. I mean, so
Yeah.
dozens and dozens and dozens of very persistent toxic pesticides. Um, Organic also sometimes people think it means more nutrient dense. We all who are working on standards and labels have a responsibility to educate our consumers. Retailers have that responsibility.
Right.
And I think as we get into regenerative, we have to do the same thing. Like there's so many different claims and understandings. We're doing consumers a disservice and we're
Right.
putting our own labels and standards at risk if we get too far out there in romance. We have to be
Yeah.
grounded in reality.
Reality and science, and consumers deserve that. They
They
deserve
do,
to really know the truth.
especially
Um,
with hard-earned dollars. I mean, they're spending premium dollars on these products. They really need to understand their attributes.
Absolutely. I want to, as we look to wrap up here, I want to talk about legislation and the
Yeah,
Farm Bill. What
you
are
bet.
you most, excited about, concerned about what's happening,
Yeah.
again, 6 months from now?
My biggest concern is we're not going to get a farm bill in
Yeah.
2025, and I don't think we will. There's some talk about in reconciliation in the president's big, beautiful budget taking care of some of the commodity titles of the farm bill, but they're not looking at specialty crop titles or things that impact organic. We've had farm bill extensions for the last 2 years that have left organic programs orphaned, things like
Yeah.
cost share for farmers to help bring some of that cost down for smaller producers. They get $750, not a ton. Um, we've lost some of our databases and our data integrity through orphan programs. So we really do need a farm bill.
Yeah.
We need bipartisan. We need that kind of like working together with Republicans wanting snap cuts and some of these other pieces. It's going to be tough in 2025. And so we're challenged by that, but we're continuing to work on it. Our legislative priorities right now are on trying to onshore that organic opportunity. So fraud prevention, as well as investment in domestic infrastructure and opportunity, and making sure that certification is right sized and right risk
Hmm.
based for our producers. Um, Research, all of the other things we always support, they'll be a part of it, but it's that we were going this direction regardless of the election outcomes,
Right.
onshoring organic opportunity. I'm a Nebraska beef kid. I raised cattle. We import the majority, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of organic beef into this country. Like we can do that on pasture
Right.
with regenerative organic practices and really create great value for our rural communities and our consumers. That's a big focus right now in our
I
approach to
mean,
policy.
organic could completely revive some rural economies, and
100%.
it's crazy that we're not investing more in it.
As you probably remember from COVID, when some of the supply chains and the meat processing sector went down because employees were getting sick, we realized, oh, we don't have enough. We're really concentrated in our meat processing. And so there were some initiatives to try to create more regional meat processing, but that's
Right.
that's the big one of the big bottlenecks is that
Yeah.
we've lost so much of what used to be like local auctions to buy animals and local processing to get it into the marketplace. We have to reinvest. Some of that requires state-based advocacy, and
Yeah.
OTA has a state organic network. We're getting more involved in state advocacy at a time when federal dollars might be shrinking.
Right. Right. That's very important. And for folks who are watching, Matthew, what do if they want to write their state legislatures or their congressional representatives, what would you encourage them to say about organic if they're
I think
if
it's
they're
important to
interested?
tell your personal story, whether you're a farmer or a consumer. Why do you choose organic? Whether it's some of the time or all of the time. Why do you choose it? Why do you believe it's important for your family or for the future? And then I think the simple communication would be, please continue to fund the National Organic Program and ensure that they have the adequate staffing and the adequate resources to ensure organic integrity and expand that organic opportunity for more farmers and eaters.
That's great. Final question. You mentioned that 2025 is the 40th anniversary of OTA. What
Yeah.
do you expect, 40 years from now from this organization?
Oh my goodness, that's a really hard question, Dani. Well, I hope I'm 97, 98, and I'm still around watching the organic sector, and I'm in my garden growing my own organic food as
You
well.
will be.
Uh, but what I would hope is that we as collectively are less us versus them in our politics, but also in our food politics, that we recognize that there's a diversity of options for farmers and businesses and eaters, and that that's okay to have those diversity of options, but that we've increased that organic option. We've made it more accessible. My kids were raised on food stamps in the early years. We were very poor, and I, I didn't have all, we grew our food in part because we didn't have
Yeah.
access to the grocery store.
Right.
So I just, I just believe that like in 40 years, if we're really going to be successful, it is about that increased access. And it's that we've also improved our succession planning, that we've seen that the
Right.
success of organic requires succession planning. We have better farms, better knowledge, more biodiversity, cleaner water. I do believe all those things are quite possible, even at times like this where it feels like we're kind of running into walls. I still am
Yeah.
totally an optimist about that long horizon.
I'm so glad you're an optimist. That gives the rest of us hope. For more information about the Organic Trade Association, you can go to ota.com. Matthew, wonderful to talk to you. Thank you for all your knowledge.
Thank you, Dani, for everything you and the team do. We really appreciate Food Tank and your staff.
Thank you so much. Talk soon.
Bye. Be well.